Okay, we are 1 week away from NAL Stage 2 of the 2022 season starting up. It's on a Tuesday. Today's a Tuesday. That's why it's a week away. So today I wanted to talk about some of the players to watch out for. I'm just going to say one player for each team. And through this lens, I guess maybe it'll give me a platform to talk about each team a little bit more, a little bit differently than I did in the previous video where I sort of talked about storylines and stuff. Now I'll maybe talk a little bit more about the roles and the other factors to a team besides the team as a whole. Talk more about the pieces of the team and the players. Okay, so here I just have the stats from the previous stage, from stage 1 of the 2022 season, and this isn't the only thing that we could look at, but it gives, I think, the best indication. It's very recent, and also it's the exact same format. It's almost all the same players, but certainly the same teams, only a handful of new players to the league coming into stage 2. And so a few of the players that I'm going to talk about don't have stats here because, again, they didn't play in this stage. Nyx, Kento, Blaz, and Gunner. And so there'll also be, I guess, a few players on here that are not still here, but still, I think this gives by far the best picture of what I want to talk about. So I have it grouped by teams. We're just going to go down the line in the order that they are presented. So, all right, DarkZero. Hyper ended up as their top-rated player. I don't think he had an especially good first half of the stage. Maybe not bad, but I think he did well enough in the second half to put him at the top of his team. NJR, pretty consistent, especially given the roles he plays on, especially like the smoke. Pamba right at the 1.0 and the Canadian Eclipse at the 0.9. Pretty respectable. These guys did end up in third place. Of course, they also went on to win the major, but that's not at all reflected in the stats here. So, you know, Canadian and Eclipse being two of the more support-oriented players on the team, a 0.9 I think is perfectly fine. Eclipse being like the hard support, and then Canadian. He doesn't always play supporting roles. He's on more of a flex. He'll just sort of pick whatever role, but a lot of the operators he does play, you know, there's like a Flores here, and that is very support-oriented. Malusi, a little bit less so. You sort of just put down your gadgets and you run around and get stuff done, but he is the IGL, so, you know, give him a little bit of a break when it comes to stats. But again, you know, 0.9 is fine when your team's getting wins. Third place is solid. The player I think to look out for in the upcoming stage is Pambazoo here. You can see him right on the 1.0. Maybe you'd like a little bit better from him considering he's sort of one of the entry players, and I think supposedly the primary entry, even though the stats are a little bit... it's tough to tell from the stats, right? With Canadian have 29 entry engagements. I imagine a ton of those are on defense. Probably also a lot are on attack. He'll hop on the Jackal and do this or that. But I believe it should still be, it's like Panda first entry, Hyper second entry largely. That doesn't always guarantee they're the ones getting in the entry engagement, or at least getting the entry kill or death, but I think that's still supposedly the structure. I imagine these numbers would be a little bit more obvious if we could just look at attack, but of course this is an attack and defense mix. So yeah, I mean, Pamba right on the 1.0, he was the major MVP. His stats weren't insane through the major, but he came up big in some of the matches that mattered most, I think, against Liquid and then in the grand final. So I think a well-deserved MVP, even though it maybe was kind of close with NJR, considering how consistent he was throughout the whole tournament, including the group stage where he was pretty instrumental. But 8 and 17 on entry from Pambazoo isn't great. As you can see, everyone is negative on entry here except for Hyper. And not that Hyper's like a baiter per se, but when you are on entry but not like the first entry, I think it's much easier to usually get the entry engagements. A lot of the onus falls on that first entry. When it comes to dying, you're able to refrag them. They're in the more dangerous position. I think it's a bit easier as the second entry to actually go positive on entry engagements. So, you know, 8 and 17, maybe a little bit negative on entries is fine if your team is making up for it in other ways, and assuming you're getting into a ton. And he did get in, you know, 25 entry engagements. That's quite a lot, but double negative is kind of brutal. And 1.0, you know, I'd like to see a little bit better from Pamba. And if that is the case, maybe they can lock in a first or second place position to best their previous placement. Okay, but I'm sure, you know, they have no real complaints making top 4 and then making it to the major by way of that top 4 placement. So, okay, moving on to SpaceStation. Skies had an absolute pop-off stage. He really benefited from the role shift that they had, so he's sort of on the flank watch, the sort of soft support here, playing the mute. But I guess 2 other players also played quite a lot of mute, or at least relative to any other one operator that they played. But yeah, Sky is doing really, really well. I mean, plus 29, he's one of the highest rated players in the league for the stage. Let me scroll down a little bit more. Yeah, and almost double positive on entry, but he's not too much of an entry player. He just took his engagements when he got them. Really high cost. Quite excellent, but I don't think Skies is the player to look out for. I think it'll be really big for the team if he continues to be good, but obviously him being really good was not enough. They didn't make top 4. They didn't make it in the major. Rampy, I think he might have had a couple kind of bad games, but obviously he did pretty well given his stats are pretty solid. Pretty bad on entry, though, which is unlike him. SpaceStation back in I think it was the first stage of last year when they had to play with Luke. Their analyst had to sub in for Canadian when that whole thing went down. They had incredible entry stats. Like Fultz was like plus 20 and Rampy was like plus 8 or 9 or something. Like they were insane on entry, even though they didn't do that well that stage. But still, usually Rampy is very, very good on entry. Fultz is as well, and he is good here. But yeah, overall, what are they even out? They're like plus 8, plus 12, so they're like dead even on entry. So they went straight up even on entry, and usually SpaceStation is one of the best, if not just the best entry team in NA. So I'd like to see them touch that up a little bit. But I think in particular the player to look out for, I almost wanted to say Fultz. I guess he ended up being okay. I swear every game he had was just like okay. Like maybe he had some slightly above average games, some slightly below average games, but he never like popped off like Fultz tends to do. But I think Hot and Cold is the player to look out for. He was insane statistically last year throughout stages 2 and 3. Even stage 1 he was quite good, but he was on Mirage for that stage. And of course, in stages 2 and 3, SpaceStation was dominantly the top team, first place in both stages, dropping only 5 points over the course of both of those stages. Not even per stage, but just 5 points total. Was absolutely nuts. And Hot and Cold was by far their best player. Again, statistically, it's unclear how much assistance he had in doing a lot of things he did. Probably a lot, given the team, the players, whatever. Yeah, I think Hot and Cold definitely needs to put up better stats. Maybe not exactly what he did before, but certainly above a 1.0, considering the roles he's playing and everything. And I believe that they've shifted the roles up a little bit this stage, so maybe things will be even a little bit different. But again, I'd like to see a little bit better from Hot and Cold, considering how incredible he was last year. And maybe even a little bit from Bosco. You know, minus 25. It's a bit unusual for Bosco. He is now just straight up on hard sport on the Thermite Smoke. And as the IGL, like there's a lot of reasons for you to have not good stats. You are doing a whole lot, but you know, just Bosco being that absolutely legendary player, maybe a little bit better from him would be nice as well. But I'm gonna say Hot and Cold as the player to watch there. Moving on to Oxygen, vertical incredible stage to follow up in incredible stage, and maybe because there's a little bit of a gap, people might forget, but he was really, really good also in stage 3 last year, like similar stats to what he put up here. So back-to-back great stages, and for that reason it doesn't feel quite like a sure thing, I guess, but it seems pretty likely that he'll be quite good again. You know, not that it's ever easy to put up 109 to 61, but I would anticipate Vertical puts up pretty solid stats again, considering the streak he's on. So I'll leave him out of this. Laxing, usually very consistent, putting up good stats, making plays that no other player seems to be able to make. Foxay, putting up pretty respectable stats. He's not on as much support as he was at one point. He's more in a flex position, I suppose, playing a lot of the sledge, and whereas I guess Vertical also plays a lot of sledge, but I feel like he usually plays a lot of Yana. I mean, clearly more sledge than Yana, but I feel like it's you know, Newers on the Finca, Vertical on the Yana, and Foxay on the sledge. So, you know, he's sort of on like a flexy sort of role, maybe even like kind of a third entry. You know, he has a fair number of entry engagements, but again, as the IGL, I think pretty solid stats, even though he's not like a hard support. And then Dream, I think it's fine. 1 in 11, a curious number of entry engagements. I don't know if that was people just taking advantage of the structure of Oxygen a lot of times. Maybe they try to just attack Dream very early because they know other players are doing other things. Maybe these are a lot of mistakes on the part of Dream. It's unclear, but I mean 12 entry engagements isn't like a ton if you think about how many rounds that they played, but it is quite a lot. Like you, as this player, as Habana Smoke, you should be actively trying to avoid, or you know, certainly at least not seeking out the opportunities unless you see a very good opportunity. And so that leaves Newers. Yeah, I mean, his stats are surprisingly bad here. He had a he had a quite solid first half, and then he really fell off in the second half. And maybe some of the games ended up being pretty close, and some of them still got across the line by way of Vertical being insane. But yeah, I definitely would like to see better from Newers, more consistency at the very least, and I think he's proven that he can do it. Again, really good first half and then a pretty rough second half, but then he was very good at the major, their best statistical player by a good amount at the major. So I think that indicates that if he can hang in that environment, which should be a lot tougher than NAL, that he should be able to come back to NAL and put up better numbers than he did overall. And not that it's like especially bad, just -4, but even matching Vertical on the exactly matching him on entry. But I'd like to see a little bit better from Newers, specifically in the way of consistency. So I think he's the player to look out for there. I think if he can again improve his consistency and everything else remains the same on the rest of the team, then probably they can lock up that first spot, moving up from second place that they just got. And then on to TSM. I mean, this one's obvious. Like, look at Bolo stats. These are not Bolo stats. This is just super strange. He had just such a rough time. 7-19 on entry, -28 KD. Just dreadful cost. One of the worst statistical players in the league for this stage, and he just needs to improve. I mean, Merc, very solid if he still is the IGL, and then Chala, very good as well, considering he's like, you know, the hard breach and smoke player. Then Achievement Geo, not even that bad, but yeah, Bolo just needs to figure out whatever he has to figure out. He's a very good player, but he had a very bad stage, so I think it's an easy one to look out for there. So okay, next up is Soniqs Grixer, another killer stage. This guy can like not be stopped, even when his team is really struggling. He puts up the numbers. It seems to not be him that is causing it. Maybe not all of his kills are especially impactful because, again, they are losing a lot of games. That means they're losing a lot of rounds. So even if you're getting a lot of kills and you're losing those rounds, I guess impactless frags. But I do think probably he's setting up his team in a lot of instances that they're not able to follow through on. Kanzan is generally pretty consistent. Not always the flashiest player, but especially a good stage from him here, considering, you know, Kai Lion going +9 and +5. A very good performance from him. Even Rexon not doing too bad. I think Yeti, player to watch here. Obviously, super stats are dreadful, but Soniqs have proven time and time again, obviously not this stage, but every other stage they've proven that they don't need super to put up good numbers for them to win. Very good showings in all 3 stages of NAL last year, and you know, pretty poor at the majors, but very solid performance at SI. So they've proven they can do it in NA. They've proven they can do it internationally, and so I think Yeti, player to watch. He is generally a bit of a feast or famine type player, and his stats aren't terrible here, of course, you know, 0.93, -5, dead even on entry. I think it's a little bit strange that he gets in so many entry engagements. I imagine a lot of these are on defense when he's like roaming around and whatever, because I think it's like Rexon first entry, Grixer kind of second entry, even if maybe Grixer lurks a little bit more than the entry label might suggest. I guess, you know, Yeti is doing a lot of it, but as the second hard breach, playing a lot of Maverick and whatnot, it seems a little bit strange. But again, I don't have the numbers in front of me for the attackers and defenders split. Super even quite a lot of entry engagements. A lot of those might have come from that very last game when Rexon couldn't play, so he subbed in Goddess. They put Goddess on support, and then Super was on like Twitch or whatever. So a decent number of those could have come from that. So I guess that's not totally reflective of the full picture. But okay, so one more time, you know, I'm gonna say Yeti. He had some really bad games, even if he had some pretty good games to counteract them, but as such a feast or famine player, as I said before, I'd like to see a little bit better in the way of consistency. So I guess we'll move on to Astralis here. Iconic, very good stage, very good major, except in the grand final where he sort of fell short. When his team needed him most, he failed them. But I'm going to say J90. I was looking through this before and sort of like skipping around and reviewing. I think Astralis is one of the only teams I didn't actually look at here. Forest, extremely impressive performance. Dead even on entry. Quite a lot of entry engagements considering the roles he plays. But +4, I think a good number of the times he's not even like... Not only will he look for opportunities when he's like on hard breach and he'll just run in and kill people if he thinks he can do it, but he'll also sometimes just be on like Yana or whatever and not actually be playing hard breach all the time. And yeah, he did it quite well. Really good at the major as well. Shuttle, quite a good stage here. Everyone doing solid. I mean, look at these stats. Everyone 1.06 or above, but I'm just gonna say J90 because he had an insane stage in stage 3 last year. Like, I think he was leagues ahead of everyone else. He set the kill record or tied it, or maybe NAL kill record. I don't remember what it was at the time, but quite an impressive performance against I think it was Oxygen on Coastline. Didn't win that game anyways, but still a lot of frags. Yeah, I guess just look out for J90 though. I think he can definitely do better than this. He just didn't need to do better than this. They did get first place anyways, and they only lost to Oxygen, right? So not much for the team to improve on within the league, but I think maybe if anyone else starts falling short, maybe I think J90 is fully capable of picking up that slack. And then we'll move on to Mirage. So these next two teams, Mirage and Parabellum, they both have players that are now in the league that aren't going to be listed here. So for Mirage, it's going to be Nyx and Kento. And Nyx coming back onto the roster. I think this was the only stage that he wasn't on the roster, and Kento new to the league. So those are easy picks for players to watch out for. Razor not around, Thomas not around, so actually the two top performers not actually on the squad anymore. Marmalade, pretty good stats, over all things considered, with being the hard breach and smoke player, the third highest rated player on the team, and just barely below these two on those roles. Good for her there. Melted, I think I would say probably if the roster didn't change, Melted was the player to look out for. I would imagine they would have done role changes, and well, now certainly they're doing some sort of role changes. I don't know what. And well, Benji, Benji, a little bit of player to look out for. I think if they do well, probably it means that Benji has done well. He's done pretty poorly in his entire time in the NAL, except for I think like stage 1 of last year. He was pretty good when they had hot and cold on. Yeah, I think there's a bunch of players you could say to look out for, but I think I'm going to say Kento. I think he's going to need to put up some pretty impressive numbers in his rookie season if Mirage wants to do well. Nick's coming back onto the roster. I think because he'll be like by far their most experienced player, I assume he'll be back onto the IGL role. I think it was Razor and Thomas that were like sort of sharing the IGL role, and now both of them are gone, so I'm assuming it's going to be Nick. So I think a lot of his contributions are not going to be visible. They're going to be in way of comms, IGL, and whatever. So I'm going to say Kento probably is going to be the biggest player to look out for in terms of statistical performance. And so we'll move on to Parabellum here. And okay, you know, Eska, really good stat. Maybe not really good, but pretty solid stats. And then Creators and Wimpy, both right around 1.0. Both of these are the players that are gone. Kool-Aid and Penguin still here with sort of modest stats, but I think it's like fine-ish. These are both the sort of support-oriented players here. Creators and Wimpy being replaced by Blaz and Gunner. So again, 2 players not actually listed on here, and they're easy picks to pick who is going to be good. Gunner, this is his first time in T1. Blaz, first time in NA. So he played in EUL before. He was on Heroic, pretty bad team. They didn't do very well. I think Blaz was pretty good, though, individually. So I guess I'll say Gunner just because he is the one with an absolute lack of experience. I think either of them are players to keep your eye on, and probably if Parabellum wants to climb their way up, if they want to make a major, they're going to need pretty impressive performances from both of them. But yeah, I will say Gunner as the one to keep an eye on there, and then I think we have the last 2 teams here. So Beastcoast and XSET, and of course talking about Beastcoast here. Yeah, when I was looking through this, Beastcoast sort of struck me as the toughest team to pick one player. So I suppose I've said like a good number of fraggers, and again, like fraggers are the players that you can just look at stats and it is most representative of their performance. It's just easier in that way. You know, if they're an IGL or a support player, they're not going to have good stats most of the time. And if they do, it's very impressive, and if they don't, it's excusable usually. So here, I actually do want to select Slashug. I mean, he's the IGL, so of course, you know, that's already taking away a lot of your focus from putting up numbers. But I feel like we could just see a little bit more from him here. He's not even on like one of the more support-oriented roles. He's sort of in the middle. He's sort of like flex, right? But Drip is mostly like the hard support, and then Anthony, sort of the flex support, I guess I'd say. But I guess the roles are a little bit reversed on defense, where Anthony is more on the... I guess he played a ton of Tajanka, but he's their smoke player generally, right? So he's like the most support-oriented player on defense, and Drip on attack, and then maybe they're still both very support-oriented once you... go on either side for either of them with a Mute and a Thatcher here. So yeah, Slashug again in the middle. A lot of Maestro play, which I think he used to do a lot of back in the day, but of course you don't see like any other players here as Maestro mains. No, you certainly don't. And so that puts you as an anchor, but it also puts you to where you have a very good gun. But you know, playing Zofia on attack, it's maybe not always as aggressive, certainly not as Finka, but Sledge, Zofia can be a little bit interchangeable in the entry position. But yeah, for a number of reasons, I'm going to say Slashug. I'd like to see just a little bit better performance from him. I mean, minus 20, minus 5, not too good. I think just if he's going to be playing on the roles he's playing, maybe gives Sweater and Surf just a little bit more backup. And this is his first time, not his first time, but this is his the first time he's been in the league for quite a while, and he's been dabbling around in like T3 and T2 for a little bit, and maybe he just needed a little bit of a refresher stage. But again, I think I'm going to say Slashug as my player to watch here for Beastcoast. And then, okay, XSET, final team. Yaga, Diaz, Kino, very good stats. I mean, especially Kino playing the roles he's playing, 1.10. He's got to be one of the highest rated support players in the league. But it is Spirits, I think, on IGL. I think maybe Kino sort of started the stage on IGL, and then they pretty quickly switched over to Spirits. XSET, I think you can anticipate a pretty good stage from them, but I think it's very possible that stage 1 will end up being a flash in the pan, especially because they can no longer have Bodega with them. I guess maybe their other coach will be standing behind them, helping them in timeout situations. But that wasn't his primary role before, so maybe he won't have the easiest time with it. Vivas, that is. But okay, that's a little bit neither here nor there. But I think it's a little bit important to mention. Yeah, I think Gomez just the player to watch out for. Sometimes it's pretty easy to just pick the worst rated player, but Gomez not too good for the roles he's playing on. He's the only player that went negative in both KD and entry, even though he should be first getting into probably more entry engagements, but probably also doing well in them, given that he's playing like the Malusi and the Yana. It's his first stage in Pro League, which is also true of Diaz, also true of Spirits, but it's not always possible for everyone to pop off in your team. There were just a lot of matches where it seemed like Gomez was the one struggling. I want to say especially like early in the stage. Maybe he had better performances later on, but he got pretty close to evening things out. But I'd like to see him get into more entry engagements. I think Spirits is primary entry, he's secondary entry, but he has 22 entry engagements. Kino has 19, Yaga has 17, so they're pretty close on his tail, despite him being the Yana player here. And then again, having the worst in terms of kills, the fewest kills on the team, and then also the second most deaths. Yeah. So yeah, just maybe a little bit better in the frag department from him would be good. And at this point, it might become necessary as the competition ramps up, people get more and more hungry to make the major. TSM and Soniqs looking to climb back up the board. SSG not going to be too happy about missing out on that major, and I mean every team gunning for the major regardless. So those are going to be my picks for the players to watch from each team, I guess, and just a little bit about each of the teams and some of the players. So if you have any feedback regarding the videos at large, but probably this one in particular, let me know. And a like, a sub, they're appreciated. With all of that being said, though, I will catch you guys in the next video.